the patients with heart disease, lung disease, diabetes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. George W. Bush one time gave a speech, and he said, some people call you the elite, and I call you my base. So when I heard, I thought of George W. Bush, and I said, some people call you the at-risk population, and I call you my base, because it read like a who's who of my patients. And we didn't want our patients coming out and getting in a taxi or getting on the bus or getting on the subway and, coming to rehab, because yeah, rehab's important, but it's not worth swimming across a moat of alligators to get to rehab. So luckily, about 2 years ago, we developed an online rehab program for cardiopulmonary patients, and it's called Pulmonary Wellness Boot Camp. And what it is it's a 42-day program, and I will teach you about it today. You are welcome to try it out. It's free. It's through our foundation, so it's open to anybody who would like to try it. The only thing we want people to do is clear it with their doctors and make sure that it's not going to be dangerous for you. So this was going very well. And we thought this would actually be perfect for COVID patients. But what we found was that a lot of COVID patients were actually too sick. And a lot of the boot camp stuff that was originally made, again, for people who were in their 70s and 80s with multiple heart and lung conditions, was actually too vigorous for them. So we revamped, and we also now have a post-COVID boot camp as well. So when it comes to interstitial lung disease, the other thing that we're doing right now is I've been involved in this working group through our foundation where we have about 8 people, and we're writing a book. I have a book that I put out, I can't even remember when, but it's called Ultimate Pulmonary Wellness. And some of you may know of Kim Frederickson, who put out a book called Living with PF, or Your Best Life with Pulmonary Fibrosis, a therapist and patient walks with you. Unfortunately, Kim Frederickson passed a few years ago when we were planning to do a collaboration of our book. But now we're back on the book, and we have about 8 patients with interstitial lung disease that are co-writing with us. And that should be out in the next couple of months, and it's going to be online, interactive. My book, Ultimate Pulmonary Wellness, is also available to read for free on our website, pulmonarywellness.org. There are certain things that are really important when it comes to living well with a respiratory disease. And it doesn't matter if it's interstitial lung disease like pulmonary fibrosis or COPD or pulmonary hypertension. There are kind of 5 things. And by the way, if anyone has questions, by all means, feel free to unmute yourself, ask questions. This can be a conversation, not a lecture. You're not going to throw me off. If you do, it'll be more entertaining for you. But there's really 5 things that I have found are the most bang for your buck when it comes to living well with a respiratory disease, and really living well in general, right? Like, everybody's looking for that magic silver bullet, that pill, that supplement, that procedure that's all of a sudden going to make the clouds disappear and make the sun come out and cure all our problems. It's really not out there. But there are things that you can do that will significantly make your life better. And, in my experience, what I found is that there are really 5 things. And in our society, medicine takes kind of 90% of what we talk about, right? You go to the doctor and it's medicine. And in 1995, there were no medications for interstitial lung disease. Now we have OFEV and Esbriet, which is great. And I was telling Mark before you guys got on, that's a lot of the research that is being done on COVID is going to, in my opinion, be helpful to people with interstitial lung disease, because we thankfully, we're not seeing a lot of interstitial lung disease in COVID patients. That was the big worry up front, that we were going to see a lot of people developing pulmonary fibrosis, and we thought we'd have this whole kind of new group of people waiting for lung transplants. Luckily, that's not happening. But they've also found some medications that can actually help to prevent and reverse pulmonary fibrosis in acute COVID patients. So there's definitely some hopeful things going on. The 5 things that I think are most helpful to people: medicine, okay? And by medicine, I talk about having the right doctor, having the right medical team, taking the right medications, and taking them properly, okay? that usually takes about 90% of what we focus on in our everyday lives and in our care of interstitial lung disease. And then on the way out the door, the doctor says, oh, yeah, get some exercise. Oh, yeah, lose some weight. Or, oh, yeah, gain some weight, right? And that's the little part. But those are the things that are really going to help you, right? Like Ofev and Esbriet, those are great things, but they come at a price. Number one, they come with a lot of side effects. But the other thing is that a lot of times when people take Ofev and Esbriet, they say, well, I don't feel any better. And that's not a surprise because Ofev and Esbriet are not supposed to make you feel better because they don't reverse the disease. Okay. What they do is they hopefully stop or slow down the progression of the disease. But very often, and this is something that people don't understand, is that very often the reason why you're short of breath, although related to your disease, the reason why you get more short of breath or less short of breath may or may not be directly related to that. And as I say over and over again, breathing is multifactorial. And what I mean by that is that there are many, many things that can, and incidentally, I see people writing notes. Don't frantically write notes because I talk fast. We're recording this and I will send a link to Mark and we'll make this available to you. Okay. And I also have a ton of other webinars that I've done on PF that I will also make available to you. But, you know, very often when people are diagnosed with a medical condition, particularly a chronic medical condition that is very severe in nature, they become these black and white monochromatic versions of their former selves that are completely devoid of color and art and music and fashion and all the things that make up life. And our lives become about going to the doctor, getting the prescription, picking up the prescription, taking the prescription, having dinner, go to sleep, get up and repeat, right? But that's not really life. And we don't want you to live to rehab. We want you to do rehab so you can live your life. But lifestyle and rehab are not just exercise, okay? So breathing being multifactorial means that it's not just your lungs that either make you feel better or worse. A lot of it could be activity level. It could be anxiety. It could be that you're overweight. It could be that you're underweight. It could be your heart. It could be a million different things. And it's important to understand that by knowing what they are and by making a little change in a few different big bang for your buck areas, you will get more out of that than trying to put all your eggs in one basket or going to the health food store and saying which pill or which supplement is best to help me breathe better, because it's not out there. Okay. Typically, when people start to get short of breath, it happens at high levels of activity. So stair climbing, walking uphill, walking fast. And at the beginning, we like to talk about that famous river in Africa called denial, right? We say, oh, I must be getting old. I haven't been exercising enough. I have put on a few pounds. I was a smoker. I did work in a coal mine, right? And we minimize it, or we learn how to kind of work around the shortness of breath. We're with our friend, we pretend we're window shopping. Oh, those earrings would look great on your wife, right? And we find ways to minimize it until there's a point where we can't minimize it anymore. Okay. But typically, what happens is people start to get short of breath at high levels of activity, and they find ways to avoid those activities, and then their body deconditions. And how well your body uses oxygen is really based on three main things. Number one, how good are your lungs at moving air in and out? Number two, how good is your heart at pumping blood? Number three, how good are your muscles at utilizing oxygen? All three get better with activity. All three get worse with inactivity. But when we stop those activities that cause us discomfort, all the muscles, all the systems that you use to walk up and down the stairs decondition. And then you get short of breath at lower levels of activity. And now maybe you get short of breath walking up a hill, and you decondition. So you stop walking up a hill and you decondition again. And then you get short of breath on flat surfaces. So you stop walking and you decondition again. And it seems like this kind of spiral that we very often attribute to progression of the disease. Okay. Sometimes it is, but a lot of times it's not. And if it is behavioral, okay, and we think about the fact that you're not engaging in enough of the good behaviors and you are engaging in some of the negative behaviors, and please understand, I just mean for your lungs. I'm not saying this in any kind of judgmental way. I'm not saying good boy, good girl, bad girl. I'm just saying that there are certain things that we know are going to make you more short of breath. And in the same way that you can spiral downhill, if you start to make some positive changes, you have the ability to spiral up the hill again as well. And I know this, number one, because I've seen probably thousands, hundreds, if not thousands of PF patients, but because I've been seeing patients for a very, very long time, just like you. I look around the room, you all look familiar to me. You look like every one of my patients. And the thing is that, a lot of times nobody tells you the things that you can do. And sometimes a small change in a little area can change your life. So, any questions so far? All right, so these are my big five, right? It's like you go on safari in Africa and they tell you the big five. You want to see the elephant, the lion, the tiger, the hippo, and I'll give you a choice of what the fifth one you want to see is. But when it comes to living well with a pulmonary disease, it's medical, 18%. Okay, don't write these numbers down. It's medical is taking the right medications, having the right doctors, taking the medications properly. And when it comes to interstitial lung disease, really getting the right diagnosis is crucial. Okay. And for a long time, and I hear this story over and over and over again from people with interstitial lung disease, that first they told me it was asthma, then they told me I was out of shape, they gave me these inhalers, and people have wasted a lot of time before they get the right diagnosis, because not everybody, not even every pulmonologist, is hep to the job when it comes to interstitial lung disease. Interstitial lung disease is one of the most complex areas of medicine. Asthma, any pulmonologist can treat. COPD, any pulmonologist can treat. Interstitial lung disease, that's a whole different ballgame. And even in New York City, there might be 7 doctors who treat interstitial lung disease. And if you get the wrong diagnosis off the bat, not only is it not going to be helpful to you, but some of the medications can actually be harmful to you. So medical is having the right doctors, taking the right medications, taking them properly. 18%. 18% is exercise, okay? 18% is nutrition. 18% is stress management and anxiety, and stress and anxiety management and relaxation training, because it's very stressful. There are very few things that are more stressful than not being able to breathe, right? And then the final one is prevention of infection. And the reason, if you add all those up, 18% each, that's 90%. And the reason why it only adds up to 90% is because you could do everything right, and then you could walk out and twist your ankle and all that stuff goes out the window, right? So there's a little thing that we have to, or in New York City, it's more likely you're going to get hit by a delivery guy on a bicycle, okay? But the thing is that there are things that you can do that can make a significant difference in your life. And I'm going to tell you the ones that I think are single most important. So number one, getting the right diagnosis is crucial, okay? Getting the right treatment. Now, if your hospital, I know most of you are treated at National Jewish, which is the Mecca, okay? But if your hospital or even your town doesn't have a specialist in interstitial lung disease, and some towns don't even have a pulmonary doctor, okay, then you need to travel to make sure that you get the right diagnosis. And every interstitial lung disease center that I know is more than happy to work with your local doctors, but you have to get the right diagnosis and you have to get put on the right path from the beginning, okay? And it's not always a simple path to get the right diagnosis, but we know that we hear the numbers 3 to 5 years, 3 to 5 years, 3 to 5 years all the time, okay? That's daunting, okay? That's a very daunting fact when somebody says to you, hey, you have IPF, and you go home and you say, I have 3 to 5 years to live, but I've been kind of running around with this for 2 or 3 years trying to get the right diagnosis. And it's like you set your watch. I know people with pulmonary fibrosis and interstitial lung disease that far surpass that. And those numbers are from a time, like I said, back in 1995, there were no medications. Okay. Back in 1995, patients were referred to me for pulmonary rehab, but they were ejected from the program because they were told they're too sick. but there are now a lot more things that we know and a lot more things that you can do to help yourself with the right knowledge. Exercise. How many people here exercise? Okay, so exercise is challenging now, right? Because we're in the midst of a pandemic. So everybody used to say pulmonary rehab, pulmonary rehab, pulmonary rehab, pulmonary rehab, right? But many centers are closed. We closed our center after 22 years on March 10th, not knowing that it was going to be for good. Because again, in New York City, I didn't want people like you getting on the bus, getting on the subway, getting in a taxi cab, getting in an Uber, and coming to rehab. It's not worth it, okay? It's not worth it coming to rehab if you do your exercise and on the way home you contract COVID, right? Luckily, 2 years ago, we created an online boot camp for cardiopulmonary patients, which we were able to transition most of our patients over to, okay? When it comes to exercise, there are really 4 things that we have to talk about. We have to talk about how often should you exercise, how hard should you exercise, what type of exercise should you do, and how long should you exercise for. Let me ask you this. What are the most challenging aspects of exercise for you? Feel free to unmute.
For me, I guess it's getting out of breath really quickly. I started out when I was first diagnosed. I can get on a treadmill and keep it at a pretty good pace for a while and not do too bad. I progressed a little and I had to use some oxygen. And next thing I knew, I did just what you're talking about. I kind of laid off my exercise. I just kind of decided, well, I don't feel like it today. I'm too tired. And I guess I've deconditioned because now I can barely start walking around the block. If it starts slightly going uphill, I'm way out of breath again. So
what do? You stop?
yeah, turn around, come back home and think about it the next day. So I've been trying this month to get out a couple of days a week anyway, if not 3. But I did just what you said too, is I avoided that street that goes uphill. Now I just turn to the right and stay flat and go around the block that way. So
You use your oxygen when you exercise?
yeah, but you know what I've decided? I've got this portable and it's pulse only. And I know that in my last 6-minute walk test, they said you need to be on 6 continuous for activity. So I've got it at 6 pulse, but I know that doesn't equate.
Right.
So I get worn out pretty quick.
That's a massive challenge right there. Okay. So what I told you was that in 1995, okay, my very benevolent mentor and I, Dr. Horatio Pineda, okay, we were not happy with you're too sick for rehab. Because again, too sick for rehab is like Alfred Hitchcock's Lifeboat, get out of the boat, go home, wait to die. Okay. And what was challenging for people was that we couldn't keep people saturated, right? And I'm looking around the room, I'm seeing some cannulas, right? And as compared to COPD, pulmonary fibrosis and interstitial lung disease patients are often a big challenge to really keep saturated, and they need a lot of oxygen, okay? So let me just tell you one thing right now, okay? First of all, with a cannula, the maximum amount of oxygen that's really gonna be effective for you is 6 liters, right? So once you need more than 6 liters to stay saturated, a regular cannula is not really enough. And some people use high flow cannulas, but we started to use non-rebreather masks in 1995 with our pulmonary patients because with the non-rebreather mask, we can give people 100% oxygen, right? A mistake that a lot of programs make is they use the vital signs to control the exercise. So in other words, you start walking and your saturation goes to 85%, and they say, oh, stop until your oxygen saturation comes back up, or stop until you're not short of breath anymore. But they don't do anything to correct the oxygen saturation. And the thing about it is it's not just time, right? A lot of programs will work you for a very long period of time, but at a very low intensity. And something to think about is that if your life requires this much activity and I exercise you down here because you desaturate or because you get short of breath, well, you could do this till the cows come home, but you still can't do this, and your life really doesn't get any better. But if I give you as much oxygen as you need, okay, so that your life requires this, and over time, I can actually get you working up here, which is very, very possible. I know this for a fact because I've been doing it for almost 30 years. It's very, very possible, but your life gets a lot better. Okay. So why is a cannula limited? Okay. If you think about, how much oxygen is in the air has about 21% oxygen. And when you're using a cannula on a continuous flow, every liter will give you approximately an additional 4%. So if you get up to six liters per minute on a continuous cannula, that's an additional 24% oxygen added to your 21%. So now you're getting 45% oxygen, okay, which is better than the 21% that's in the air. But if I give you a mask, I could give you 100% oxygen. I've seen people using a cannula with 8 liters, 10 liters, right? And it's really not effective anymore. Not only is it irritating to the airways, but it's drying to the airways. And it's almost like if you asked me, you told me you're thirsty and can I give you a drink of water? And I use a fire hose to give you the drink of water, right? So some of it's definitely going to get in there, but most of it is going to wind up going all over the place and it's going to be very uncomfortable for you. Same type of thing with oxygen, okay? So what I do always is I will try. Now, another thing is that it's got to be continuous oxygen. So the pulsed oxygen is not the same. So this has been something that I think we've kind of gotten the word out. And I do have a webinar that I have a 2-hour webinar that I did all about how to use oxygen that will make available to you as well. And I wrote a series of articles called Oxygen Manifesto with Mark Mangus and Donna Fraunfelter, the super gurus of pulmonary rehab, my heroes from when I was a kid. Because I was a nerd when I was a kid and I love the lungs. But the thing is that if you're not getting enough oxygen, then not only are you not helping yourself, but you could actually do yourself some type of damage. Now, I want to dispel a myth because some people say as soon as your oxygen goes below 90, your organs start to die, right? And it's not quite like that. It's not like this cliff, okay, where people think like, oh, I'm at 88%. I think I hear my liver starting to die. No, it doesn't work like that, okay? But over the long term, if you are hypoxic, meaning that your oxygen saturation is low, over time it is going to have some detrimental effects. It could affect your blood vessels. It could, increase the pressures in your pulmonary circulation and your pulmonary artery. So it's really important that you remain well saturated over the long term, and especially during exercise, okay? In my opinion, it's important to have a conversation with your doctor that allows you to make adjustments based upon need, right? There's a lot of people who think they know when they should be using their oxygen. And it's not just when you're short of breath. There's plenty of people who are short of breath that have oxygen saturation that's 96%. So I used to think that those people wouldn't benefit from using oxygen. After the past year of COVID and seeing 279 COVID long haulers in 1 year, COVID long haulers benefit even if their oxygen saturation is good. They still benefit from oxygen in other ways, okay? But if your oxygen saturation is low, in other words, below 90, even if you're not short of breath, you still need to be using oxygen. And not only do you need to be using oxygen, but you will get a great benefit from using oxygen. Now, the oxygen's not the treatment, but the oxygen will keep you safe and will allow you to do the exercise that is the treatment. Remember, I told you before that how your body uses oxygen is based on your lungs, your heart, your muscles. All three get better with activity, and exercise, all three get worse with inactivity. So our goal is to give you as much oxygen as you need to meet the demand of whatever every exercise that you do. And it's really based on supply and demand. So when you're sitting and doing nothing, the demand is low. So you can use your oxygen at a low amount. But if you're walking on the treadmill, the demand gets higher. And the best explanation of this, and you really have to rely on your instruments also. So when I talk about relying on your instruments, I mean your pulse ox, right? When you fly, I don't know if anyone here has ever flown a plane before, but when you are flying, air looks like air. So you need an altimeter to tell you how many, how high or how low you are. I don't know if anybody here has ever gone scuba diving before, but water looks like water. So you have to use a depth gauge to tell you if you're at 100 feet or 200 feet so you don't get in trouble. And not everybody can tell. It's not like somebody stands at the carnival and says, I'll guess your oxygen saturation, your age, or your weight. Okay. So rely on your instruments. And if your oximeter tells you that you're 85%, in my opinion, and this is something that, of course, you should ask your doctor, but you should be able and you should be given the green light to turn up your oxygen. Okay. The best description of this was by one of my favorite doctors, Dr. Norma Braun, who said, look, if you get chilly, you put on a sweater. And if the room cools, if the room gets warm again, you take your sweater off. And in my opinion, part of educating patients, doctors should be teaching people how to use their oxygen most effectively so that you can keep up the activities that will help keep you well. Exercise and activity will help keep you well. So Mark, you made a very good point, which is that the portable oxygen concentrators, number one, the numbers on them when they're pulsed are just settings. Okay. And I think we've beat this point home, enough times over the years that most people know it. And most people who've seen our work, are also teaching the same thing. But even the Inogen, the new Inogen that goes from 1 to 6, the maximum oxygen you're going to get, even at the peak, is 1,260 milliliters of oxygen, which is 1.26 liters of oxygen, which means that if you need, 6 liters, or you need 10 liters with a mask on continuous oxygen to remain saturated, you don't have a snowball's chance in hell of remaining saturated with that, right? So we have to make an adjustment. And we either have to change the device we use, or we have to change the way that we go about our activity. When it comes to oxygen portable concentrators, I was once in a hardware store, and there was a sign on the front wall behind the register, and it says, when it comes to construction jobs, everybody wants three things. They want it done well, they want it done fast, and they want it done cheap, right? And you can have any two of the three. You could have it done well and you could have it done cheap. It's not going to be fast. You could have it done well and you could have it done fast. It's not going to be cheap. You could have it cheap and fast. It's not going to be good. Okay. When it comes to oxygen, everybody wants three things. They want high liter flow. So they want a lot of oxygen. They want it to last a long time, and they want it to be light, right? You could have any two of the three. Okay. It's that simple. And what you have to do is you have to track what's going on with you so that okay, so that when you need to turn it up, when this device is no longer going to be good for you. Because, it's not like, I'll tell you what it is. If your oxygen concentrator is not giving you what you really need, it's like the friend who's holding you back from, tells you, the friend that's never really going to make anything of himself, but they get you to cut class, right? So you're now not doing the things that you need to do to get into a good college. So you have to really prioritize, at least during exercise, getting the right amount of oxygen. Nutrition. Okay, nutrition is very important when it comes to respiratory disease. I'm going to give you some information right now that is very important to you. Not everybody I speak to knows it. A lot of people don't know it. But how many people here are trying to lose weight? Raise your hand. How many people here are trying to maintain or gain weight? Okay. So two different problems, right? So if you're overweight, okay, and not just how much overweight are you, but where does your weight sit, right? So if you are 25 pounds overweight and your weight sits right here in the center of your body, well, guess what? That weight is pulling down on your ribs. And every time you want to take a breath, you have to elevate 12 and a half pounds on each side. 12 and a half pounds is like a bowling ball, right? So if I gave you two bowling balls, tied one to each side of your ribs, and then said, okay, walk with these bowling balls, most of us would be short of breath, right? So if being overweight is your issue, it is worth your while to try to lose the weight. But with interstitial lung disease, more often than not, over time, people have difficulty maintaining their weight. Does anybody know why? So there's a number of reasons why, okay? First of all, preparing meals can become difficult for you.
Yeah, true.
Number two, okay, when you eat, Okay, so here's a quick anatomy lesson not drawn to scale. Okay, we have our lungs, and our lungs come like this, and then they come in around, they go around to the back. Underneath our lungs is our diaphragm, right? The diaphragm is the main muscle of inspiration, and when the diaphragm contracts, it contracts downward, and this creates a negative pressure, and that is what causes the lungs to inflate. Okay, underneath the diaphragm is the abdominal contents, right? So when we get full, that abdominal contents are pushing up, and the diaphragm has to work harder to contract downward. And sometimes it's even pushed up by the abdominal contents. So many people get short of breath after a meal. Anybody have that experience? That sounds like a yes. So the thing is that couple of things here. So if you're more short of breath and your diaphragm has to work harder against that resistance, well, then you have to take shallower breaths. And if you have to take shallower breaths, that means you have to breathe more quickly, right? So it's like the difference in breathing a cup or drinking from a cup this size and a cup this size. The smaller your cup, the more trips you have to make, right? And it's the same thing with breathing. So number one, you're short of breath because you have this mechanical obstruction to your diaphragm contracting downward. And incidentally, your body doesn't care if it's liquid, solid, or gas. Okay. So if you're bloated, same effect. Still is going to have the same impact. If it's a drink and it's liquid, same effect. Solid, same effect. So if you think about it as a suitcase, right? If your thoracic cavity is one side of the suitcase and your abdominal cavity is the other side of the suitcase, if you overstuff one, it's going to encroach on the other, and it's going to make you more difficult for you to breathe. Now, another thing is that we've just talked about it's hard to prepare meals and you can't have a big meal, right? So both of those things reduce the supply of energy available to you for breathing, okay? The other thing is the demand. When you have to breathe more shallowly and you have to breathe more quickly and it takes more work for you to breathe, your metabolism is sky high and you are burning calories like nobody's business, okay? Because you're working so hard to breathe. So it's like even when you're sitting and doing nothing, it's almost like you're exercising at times, right? So we need a strategy with this, okay? And the strategy that I'm sure you may have heard before is to eat more frequent meals and to eat smaller meals, right? How many people are doing that? All right. Now is a part that you may or may not know, okay? There's something called the respiratory quotient. And what that is about is the fact that not all calories are created equal, okay? There's three macronutrients: carbohydrate, protein, and fat, right? And number one, they don't have the same number of calories in them, okay? So protein and carbohydrate have about 4 calories per gram. Fat has 9 calories per gram, okay? So protein and carbohydrate, 4 calories per gram, fat, 9 calories per gram. Take that from one side of your brain, store it in the back for 1 second, okay? Now, what the respiratory quotient talks about is the fact that not eating each of those macronutrients produces a different amount of carbon dioxide in its digestion. Okay. And we know that carbon dioxide is what stimulates us to breathe. So, high carbohydrate in our blood stimulates us to breathe, in addition to low oxygen, in addition to high hydrogen ion or more acidic, pH. And fat produces zero 0.7 respiratory quotient. Protein is 0.8 and carbohydrate is 1.0. Okay, don't write that down. Just understand the concept that I'm about to tell you. What that means is that when you eat carbohydrates, so 1 gram of carbohydrate versus protein and fat, carbohydrates will produce the most carbon dioxide of all the nutrients at 1.0. Protein will produce zero 0.8 and fat will produce 0.7. So what that means is that fat is going to produce the least carbon dioxide per gram and carbohydrate is going to produce the most. And what that tells you is that you want to limit carbohydrates and focus on protein and healthy fats, because if you have that big pasta meal, right, your body's just spilling carbon dioxide into your blood and sending a message to your chemoreceptors that goes, breathe, 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 breathe. Now you're short of breath. We now have this mechanical obstruction here, right? So we got mechanics. We now have a chemical activity here. And now we're getting short of breath. And we now are burning a ton of calories. So if you are trying to gain weight or maintain weight, okay, whether you're trying to lose weight or gain weight, okay, carbohydrates should be eaten in a minimum. So no bread, no pasta, no cookies, no cake, no rice. Simple rule, if you like it, don't eat it. Okay? Follow that rule. If you like it, don't eat it. Okay?
Oh, no, no, no.
Okay. But you will find that if you start to limit carbohydrates, you will start to be able to digest your meals better and be less short of breath over meals. And if you're not getting adequate calories, then you can't support your muscles and you can't support activity adequately. Okay. And you're basically running on fumes. So if you're trying to lose weight, I would focus on low carbs. I would focus on moderate protein, and I would focus on a little bit of healthy fat. But when I talk about healthy fat, I'm not talking about bacon, right? I'm talking about like olive oil, avocado, things that are heart healthy. And if you're trying to if you're trying to gain weight, okay, then your diet is the dream diet. You could have all the fat you want, but make it healthy fat. So I would put olive oil on everything I do. I would get a protein shake that doesn't have carbohydrates in it, right? When people are trying to maintain or gain weight, a lot of times they'll get Ensure or they'll get, some of these things that are very high in sugar, very high in carbohydrates. And if you want to maintain muscle or add weight without becoming more short of breath, because it's almost like it defeats the purpose. I'm putting in more calories, but if it's carbohydrates, these calories are going to make me more short of breath. There's no point. You're exhausting yourself to run in place. Okay. So low carb for everybody. Okay. If you're trying to gain weight, more fat, moderate protein. If you're trying to lose weight, more protein, moderate fat. Martha, question.
Yeah. Does fiber affect carbohydrates? That was something I was taught when I went vegan,
So,
to divide fiber into the carbs.
so
And
fiber
then
usually is associated with carbs, but you can also look at net carbs, right? Because fiber also serves a purpose, which is that it helps to clear your system, right? And that's important too. So if you need the fiber, then you should take the fiber. But again, it's like I went to a nutritionist recently, right? I'm gonna do a stand-up comedy routine about this nutritionist visit, right? You go to a nutritionist and she's like, do you like to have a little salad as a snack? Say, if I like to have a little salad as a snack, I wouldn't need a nutritionist. She'll say, would you like to, do you think maybe as a snack you might have 3 crackers? And I'm like, 3 crackers? Like, if I open a box, I'm eating the whole box, okay? But the idea is like 3 crackers might work if they're 3-foot by 3-foot crackers, okay? But the idea is, all these things contribute. So you do need some fiber. But again, a lot of us, when we think about, trying to gain weight or trying to maintain weight, so ice cream, right? Ice cream sundae, or pasta, right? But again, if those things are going to make you short of breath, ultimately what we want is we want health and we want quality of life. Okay. Any questions about the nutrition? So you get that, right? Has anyone heard that stuff before? Okay. Have you heard about the carbon dioxide stuff before? So it's not just the calories. Okay. It's the mechanics of what's in your stomach. It's the chemistry of what are you eating, and it's the calories. But here's one other thing. Okay. Everyone's told drink a lot of water, right? Drink a lot of water, drink a lot of water, drink a lot of water. If you're trying to lose weight, okay, drink a lot of water. You should be drinking only water. If you're trying to gain weight, you should never be drinking water. Why? Because remember what I told you before, the body doesn't care if it's solid, liquid, or gas, right? If you fill your stomach up with water, which is healthy for you, but has 0 calories, well, you're taking away space in that suitcase for things that are going to be healthy for you. And if you are going to eat carbohydrates, please make sure it's not like Wonder Bread Sorry, Wonder Bread, please don't sue me, but I'll say, like, you know, at least bleached white bread, at least if you're going to eat the carbohydrates, make them complex carbohydrates, get them in the form of vegetables, get them in the form of whole grains, not stuff that's just going to go in and be like cardboard for you. So those are just some simple nutrition stuff. The other thing is Beth posted in the chat, and I can send this also to Mark so you have all the links. There's 3 articles here about Oxygen Manifesto, and it's about the devices and how to use it. There's also a 3-hour lecture that I did in Baylor a couple of years ago, and it's really everything you need to know about living well with pulmonary fibrosis. Like, today is a limited time. I usually don't take speaking engagements of less than 8 hours because I talk a lot, as you can tell. But that one, you can digest it, no pun intended, in small doses and have it as a reference. And also on our website, my book is available to read for free. And in the nutrition chapter, it talks about all these things in a very simple way. Okay. Other things, stress management and relaxation training. How many people here feel anxious? All right. How many people don't feel anxious? Raise your hand. All right. So for you people that don't feel anxious, what is wrong with you? You should feel anxious now. If you don't feel anxious now, when will you feel anxious? We just went through a year of COVID, shortness of breath. There's very few things. I always, and I hate to say it because it gives sharks a bad name, and I love sharks, but there are very few things in life other than maybe getting chased by a shark or a bear that are more terrifying than being short of breath, right? But that's what happens is people go out, they get short of breath. And if you don't know if you are going to make it back home, then you're not going to go to the grocery store. If you don't know, like, it's like, you know, I say Sanford and Son, it's like, say, oh, you get short of breath and you feel your heart pounding and your chest tightens up and you're like, oh my God, Elizabeth, I think it's the big one. Well, who's going to go? It's like, if you don't know how to swim, you're not going in the pool, right? It's that simple. But if you can learn what's okay and what's not okay, and you can be short of breath, but that doesn't mean you can have a heart attack. Sometimes you might, but that's why you get your heart checked also. But it's learning breathing techniques that will also help you to control the shortness of breath, so that little by little by little, we can start to add exercise, okay? And when we talk about adding exercise, people think, oh, I can't even do a minute. Most people could do a minute, but if you can't do a minute, do 30 seconds and then take a break and do another 30 seconds. And that's how we build it up, and that's what boot camp's about. And I'm gonna show you boot camp before we stop. But you have to manage your stress, anxiety, and depression, okay? Very stressful to be short of breath, very anxiety provoking, but think of it like this. How many people get nervous when they get short of breath? Raise your hand. All right. How many people don't get nervous when they get short of breath? What is wrong with you? No, I'm just kidding. But the idea is that when you get short of breath, right, it hits our brains and we're like, uh-oh, I'm getting short of breath. I'm aware of my breathing now, right? And we think of this giant snowball effect. And it's like, uh-oh, is this going to be the big one? So we stop. Okay. But what happens when we do that is we have this response called the fight or flight response, right? And you hear a lot about it these days because a lot of the COVID patients have this exaggerated fight or flight response. And what that is it's your sympathetic nervous system kicking in. And the way that the sympathetic nervous system kicks in is it puts out all this adrenaline into your body, right? And if puts out your adrenaline, it makes your heart beat faster, it makes you breathe faster, makes you even more uncomfortable. And it's this cycle, right? So it's like we get short of breath, we become anxious. Anxiety makes us more short of breath. We get more, and so we have to have some kind of control so that when this begins, we can put out this fire before it even gets started. And the way to do that is stop. I know what to do here. Also in the book, all the breathing techniques. Also in boot camp, all the breathing techniques, okay? But don't try this out for the first time, you know, when you're about to climb a hill in San Francisco. Try these things out and practice them at home when you feel good, when you're at rest. And the key to success, so we used to see people 2 or 3 times a week, and we used to push them very vigorously under fully monitored conditions. So in our rehab center, everybody wears a heart monitor, EKG when they exercise. We're checking their oxygen. We're checking their blood pressure every 5 minutes, okay? Now at home, you don't have access to all that. So how did we get around it? Number one, we don't push you as hard, but instead of 2 or 3 times a week, we do exercise every day, 7 days a week, and 42 days. Boot camp, original boot camp is a 42-day program. And I guarantee you, okay, that if you start this program on Monday of next week, within 42 days, you will be able to walk for 30 minutes. And if not, I will give you your money back. Okay? Now, just keep in mind that I already told you it's a free program. So don't go check your mailbox every day waiting for your money to come back. Okay? But you will. Okay? And I'm looking at everybody here. Nobody here looks too sick to be able to do it. Okay? So if your doctor is okay with you exercising, start boot camp because it works. Okay? Final thing, prevention of infection. And then I'm going to take questions. Okay? Prevention of infection is very important because an infection to somebody with interstitial lung disease is not an infection to somebody who doesn't have interstitial lung disease. Now, I am thankful to say that very, very, very few, less than one handful of the people that I know in our community have died of COVID, okay? I know 31 people personally who've died of COVID, but none of them have been from the pulmonary community. Why? Because we have been preparing for this day for decades, right? Because all the same things that cause COVID are the same things that cause the common cold, are the same things that cause pneumonia, are the same things that cause the flu, are the same things that cause an exacerbation of your pulmonary disease. So all the things we've been talking about for all these years, washing your hands frequently, avoiding crowds in the wintertime, avoiding sick people, wearing a mask when you are potentially going to be exposed, those things work against COVID as well. So that's it in a nutshell. Ultimate pulmonary wellness, medical, having the right doctor, taking the right medications, taking the medications properly, exercise, nutrition, stress management, relaxation training, and prevention of infection. Any questions so far? I know.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
What is your opinion of transtracheal oxygen?
So transtracheal oxygen. So great question. Okay. I don't have a lot of experience with it. Okay. For some reason in the Northeast, there's not a lot of patients who use transtracheal oxygen. So again, I can count on one hand, the number of patients I've seen with transtracheal oxygen. But let me talk about theory of transtracheal oxygen. Okay. So the trachea, okay, is this windpipe, right? And it goes like this and like this. If you put your hands, or if you put your finger, there's like over here, there's like this notch over here. This is called the sternal angle or the angle of Louis. And this is consistent with where the trachea splits into right and left main stem bronchi. Now, here's the thing about this, okay? Air from the trachea cannot get into your bloodstream. Okay, air from your trachea doesn't go into your bloodstream. It has to surpass the trachea and get into your lung tissue, right? So if we think about the trachea, let's say we're going to a Broadway show. The trachea is the hallway that gets you to the door that gets you to the inside of the theater, okay? So you could get right up to that theater door, but until you get inside the theater, you don't see any of the show. You may hear some of it, but that's probably not what you paid all that money for, right? So unless you get that air into your lungs, it's not going to be usable by your bloodstream. Now, here's the other thing about the trachea. So the trachea holds approximately as many milliliters of air as your body weighs in pounds. It's not exact, it's approximate, but let me give you an example. Let's say you're 150 pounds and the trachea holds 150 milliliters of oxygen, right? You're gonna have to take my word on the math now, okay? But just try to understand the principle. I'm gonna say it slowly, okay? The average person breathes about 6 liters per minute, right? So if you think about 6 liters of water, right? If we use very little cups, then we have to make a lot of trips to fill up that 6-liter bucket. Okay. If you have a bigger cup, we can make less trips. If you're breathing at 12 breaths per minute, normal breathing is 12 to 20 breaths per minute. So if you're breathing at 12 breaths per minute and you divide that into the 6,000 milliliters, that means each breath is about 500 milliliters, right? And if we subtract the 150, that is the trachea, that means about 350 milliliters of air per breath gets in. Are you with me so far? All right. If you're breathing 20 breaths per minute and you divide that into 6,000, right? That means each breath is 300 milliliters of air. 300 milliliters of air minus the 150 from the trachea, 150 milliliters of air get into your lungs where you can use it. With me, right? All right. So next order of business is if you're breathing 40 breaths per minute and you divide that into the 6,000, that means that each breath is 150 milliliters. And if you subtract that 150 milliliters, not any air is getting into your lungs where it could go into your bloodstream, which means that you have to focus on taking slower breaths and deeper breaths and work on this over and over and over again. The slower breaths and the deeper breaths is tool number 1, right? So that's filling your gas tank, okay? The second tool is the oxygen, okay? Turn up your oxygen as high as it goes if you need to maintain saturated in the 90s. If you're up at 6 liters of continuous oxygen and you're still not remaining saturated, then go to a mask, right? A non-rebreather mask, and that will allow you to do more. And all those things are the tools that will allow you to do the exercise. And the exercise is what's going to make you stronger, better, more fit, less short of breath. And even though we're giving you oxygen, one thing that people worry about a lot is they say, well, if I start using this oxygen, will I become addicted to oxygen, right? Well, first of all, we're all addicted to oxygen. Second of all, people will say, if I use more oxygen, won't that mean that I need more oxygen? No, it doesn't. And it could actually mean that you need less oxygen because by doing that exercise, remember what I told you before, your lungs get better, your heart gets better, your muscles become more efficient. So that will actually allow you to take less breaths over time and allow your body to become more efficient at using oxygen. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I forgot the whole point why I started telling you all that stuff. Transtracheal oxygen. As soon as I heard your voice again, I was like, I know I started talking about this. Okay. So here's the thing. What transtracheal oxygen does is it puts the oxygen right where you need it. It bypasses that hallway. So that transtracheal oxygen is like the house seats. You don't have to wait on any lines. You don't have to wait till the show opens. You get escorted right to the lungs where you could use it. Now, again, I don't have a lot of experience with patients that have used it. There is a woman named, I believe her name is Barbara Jo Matson, Matson. She's a patient, and I feel like I'm getting one part of her name wrong. I know her last name is Oh, I'm sorry, that's not her name. I'm getting her whole name wrong. Her name is Roxlyn Cole, okay? RoxlynCole. Huge proponent and advocate for transtracheal oxygen. And this is a very athletic woman, okay? And she loves it. If you want to talk, she's always willing to talk to people. You go on Facebook, look up Roxlyn Cole. She will talk all day, every day about transtracheal oxygen if you give her the opportunity. Say, hey, you know, Biden's president, transtracheal oxygen. Hey, you know what? The Yankees won the World Series, transtracheal oxygen. Hey, you want to go out to dinner? Only if we could talk about transtracheal oxygen. But she knows a lot about it. So there's a lot of plus sides to it, potential downsides to it. You have an open hole in your throat, okay? So you have to have a trach. And there is potential for infection. But what it does is it allows you to do a lot more activity. It's a really personal choice. I would say this, I would say it's something you talk about with your doctor. You really have to research the pros and cons of it. and decide, well, is this something that, am I willing to take the risks that are associated with it to get the benefits that are associated with it?
Yeah,
Hello.
let me just say something too. Oh, Katie, go ahead.
Oh, hi. Hi, everybody. Noah. Hi, it's Katie Rosen. And first of all, I can't thank you enough. I will say this for all the guest speakers that I get, they're going to have some big shoes to fill after we've had your presentation. So thank you. We formerly did a lot of
Competition.
What's that?
Try to eliminate any competition.
Oh, no, trust me, this is really phenomenal. So historically, actually, Denver, I think, was one of the birthplaces of big transtracheal oxygen, because obviously we're at 5,000 feet and oxygen is very much an issue. Unfortunately, due to COVID, for all the areas of devastation this virus has caused, the transtracheal oxygen program, Pat, is right now really on indefinite hold. And the reason for that is several things. Initially, it was because taking down OR time, doing procedures on patients, bringing you into the hospital. But the bigger issue has become the main supplier of our transtracheal oxygen catheters. It's a company here in Denver called
Scoop.
Transtracheal Oxygen Solutions. The Scoop program has gone out of business because of COVID. And so for those of you that have transtrach catheters, I think most of us have tried to reach out to you to let you know you're going to be okay. We're going to have a supply for you for catheters. But let me know. You guys always know that you can send me an email and I'll make sure your company knows.
There's only one company that makes those?
There's been like one main company that makes the catheters, at least for us here in Colorado. And I think it's very much a shame because and no, I really appreciate you addressing masks. And for anybody that's a patient of mine, if you want help getting a mask, you just let me know. No, I have a quick question about masks for you after I say this. But, when you have high flow oxygen in your nose and you live at Denver altitude, or those of you who live up in the mountains even higher, moisture is down to here, dryness up to here. So you get a lot of nosebleeds. The higher the flow, the more you bleed, and then you end up putting your cannula in your mouth. And I've had a lot of patients that they went to transtrach and their nose is healed and there's no more bloody noses. And it was just really great. So I actually.
How many people live in Denver? What is wrong with you people? No, I'm kidding.
So anyway, so I'm still very much in touch with Michael Schwartz and Elaine Schwartz, who are transtrach physicians. Noah, I have a quick question for you. I often prescribe something called an oxymizer mask that is a type of mask with like these holes in it, that it's not have the rebreather thing. And they tell me it can go up to 15 liters. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I've never had success with an oxymizer. Okay. So the oxymizer, so the original oxymizer was a pendant with a cannula, right? And then they developed the mask for it. But the big difference in the bag, right, is the size of the reservoir, right? And why a non-rebreather mask works so well. So even if we gave you more oxygen, like if we gave you a simple mask, like we could give you a lot of oxygen, but you're still going to lose a lot of oxygen. There's only, still all the percentage of oxygen is not going to be as great. But when you have this reservoir bag here, that ensures that your entire breath in and out is going to be 100% oxygen. Now, that being said, everything is relative. Okay. So I don't necessarily say like, hey, there's a fly, let me get my shotgun and kill the fly. If I could get him with a fly swatter, I don't like to kill flies. Actually, I don't like to hurt animals in any form, but the idea is that, if an oxymizer works, it works. Okay. So I would say this, I would say, try it out. At one point we were, I'll tell you how, the oxygen companies are shady. Okay. There was one point where we said, we had a huge center. We had the biggest cardiopulmonary rehab center in New York City, right? And I called all the oxygen companies and I said, this is what I would like to do. I would like to offer a facility where patients can come in and try out each device and see if it keeps them saturated, right? Because I've had conversations with the people at, I don't want to mention any names, but it rhymes with like cinnamon you know, cinnamon, like it's an oxygen company, but like I've had them, you know, I've had patients say, you know, I want to get this device, the Inogen G5 or whatever it is. Okay. And I say, that's not going to help you. That's not going to keep you saturated. Right. And the people say, oh, they told me it will. They don't know you. I know you. And they don't know what I know about oxygen. Okay. And you get on the phone and you realize that they really don't know much about oxygen or how they work. Right. Or especially how they work with interstitial lung disease. So the idea behind that they will have you believe, or this is the theory behind pulsed oxygen. Well, it's only coming out when you're breathing in. So it's just like getting the same amount of oxygen, right? This is what it's like. You're across the room, okay? So in order for you to really get the maximum amount out of your portable oxygen concentrator, because what most people do is they'll go like this, they'll go, and then they hear it, and they think they've gotten the oxygen, right? So they go, you hear, when I start doing that, I want you to go like that. I want you to go, that's the sound of the men. Or be like, okay, but here's the idea, right? In order for that to work, even at its best theory, is you have to take that breath. Now that just releases it. That releases the bolus of oxygen, right? But that bolus of oxygen still has to travel up your nose, down the trachea, which we just talked about, and into your lungs, right? So imagine if I were a major league pitcher, right? And I were holding an M&M and you were across the room and I'm going to throw you a fastball with this M&M and you have to just open your mouth at the exact right time to catch the M&M and swallow it, okay? Listen, I know that people need concentrators. We talked about it before. We said you want something light and that gives a lot of oxygen and lasts a long time. But if it doesn't work and it doesn't keep you saturated, then it's useless, right? So it's like having a life jacket, but only one of the things is blown up, right? It doesn't matter if it doesn't hold you up. It doesn't matter. If it doesn't hold you up, you're still going to sink. And it's the same thing with these concentrators. I only had one patient in 30 years who did exactly what she needed to do with pulmonary fibrosis to maintain her saturation. She came from Brooklyn and she had a giant shopping cart and she would carry 8 to 10 e-tanks in her shopping cart and she used a mask. And that's really what you need. Before COVID, we were working on a device for PF patients, which is going to be a rolling walker, but that also holds a lot of oxygen and works in a very smooth way, because that's really what you need to do if you want to do it right. Okay. Another thing to keep in mind is this. People don't like when I say this, but I'm going to say it anyway because it's very useful. Okay. Don't worry. I know you guys are from Denver. I'm not going to make any Trump jokes. But here's the thing. So a lot of people don't know this. So many people will say, I can only walk a half a block. So Mark, you said, you know what? I can only walk a half a block and then I get short of breath. I have to go back. Okay. Here's a biomechanical fact. When I am moving my arms like this, when my arms are free to move around in space, this is called open chain activity. Okay. And in an open chain, my chest does this and this. My back does this and this. My shoulders do this and this, okay? But how many people feel better when they lean forward on something and feel like they can breathe better? Anyone? All right. Why? Okay. The reason why is because in open chain, my thorax is the stabilizer and these are the moving parts, right? When I lean forward like this, okay, I can't move my desk, okay, but my arms become the stabilizer and all the muscles of the chest and the back and the thorax work in their reverse action to help you take a breath, okay? So what that means is that for those of you that think you can only walk a half a block, and here's the part that people don't like, and I'm not gonna make fun of Trump, I'm just gonna say it in Trump's voice. If you were, no, I'm just kidding. But if you were to take a rolling walker, okay, right now, and start walking with that rolling walker, think of what you're doing. Number one, you're getting the balance. Number two, you're getting a little help with the push. And number three, you're creating an open chain that sets your body up for very nice respiratory mechanics. You will be able to walk more, okay? And we've spoken about, you know, the oxygen as an increase in supply. We've talked about the breathing techniques as an increase in supply. And if you were to use that rolling walker, that would also be an increase in supply. Now, nobody wants that, right? Because they think, I'm not an old lady. I'm not an old man. I'm not going to use a rolling walker, right? But if I were to give you something like if you broke your leg and I needed you to use a crutch, would you say, I'm not an old man. I'm not an old lady. I'm not going to use a crutch. No, you'd use the crutch, right? But by using this rolling walker, even if you don't need it for balance, even if it has nothing to do with balance, by using it, if that allows you to walk more, which it will instantly, okay, I guarantee it, okay? If if I'm wrong about this, Mark will give you your money back for the walker, okay? But the thing is that will let you do the things that are going to make you less short of breath. So that will let you do the exercise that will make your lungs more efficient, that will make your heart more efficient, that will make your muscles more efficient. And again, I'm looking around the room. You guys don't look like aliens to me. You guys look like every single one of my patients from the past 30 years. This is a good sample of my patients, okay? Except in New York City, we have more diversity than Denver, okay? Cultural diversity, okay? But the idea is that everybody sitting here can get better. I would bet my left pinky on it, okay? But it's just a matter of taking one little thing from each of the things that I've spoken about. So I talked about medicine, right? I talked about exercise. I gave you a few exercise tips, nutrition. I gave you gold in the nutrition area, managing stress and anxiety, Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, meditation, all helps. Prevention of infection, okay? And that's the key to life, okay? And again, we don't want you to live to rehab. We want you to rehab to live. Let me share my screen with you.
Well, let me ask a quick question. I want to go back to the masks.
Yes.
You know, I use cannulas, as you can see. I also have a trans trach. I just didn't change it out this morning, so that's why I got the cannula on. But I'm really interested about the mask. Where do you get the mask? Does it just hook up to your normal oxygen? I like the mask at night with my CPAP, works great. But I've never seen a mask for just getting through the day.
All right, so let me share my screen with you. So can you see my screen?
Yep.
All right, so let's go to Amazon. Non-rebreather mask. Okay, this is what we're talking about. Here's one for $680. Here's one for $1190. Here's 10 for $20.99. Oh, yep, this is it too. So you have to make sure that it's got this bag with it. That's what makes it, you know, a non-rebreather mask. Okay, and here's a whole bunch of places you could get it. You don't even have to tell anybody.
It's called a non-rebreather, huh?
Non-rebreather. Yep, and I'll put this link right here in the chat.
Thank you.
Okay, so a couple of caveats to this. So that'll take you right to the Amazon website. Now, if you have Amazon Smile, think about the Pulmonary Wellness Foundation, because when you buy a non-rebreather mask, they will give us some money. Okay. Now, next order of business. Okay. In order for a mask to be effective, okay, the minimum amount of oxygen that will work is 6 liters continuous. Okay, because otherwise it's not going to keep the bag full enough.
Okay.
So it does require either a concentrator with continuous flow that goes at least 6 liters per minute. And now there are some beautiful ones that go liters per minute, and that would be great, you know, for home use. And if you're out, then you really need a tank with continuous oxygen. They don't work with, you know, pulsed oxygen, and you do need a substantial liter flow. So if you're using less than 6 liters, then, you know, if less than 6 liters keeps you well saturated, then by all means, continue to use the cannula. But at a certain point, if no matter what you do, that cannula doesn't do the trick, then the mask is a simple solution. And again, you know, I told you, I started treating pulmonary fibrosis patients in '95. And at that time, We didn't even know what we could do. But once we started to fiddle around with these high doses of oxygen, boy, it was like the Wizard of Oz when it turns from black and white to color, because all of a sudden we were able to do things with our interstitial lung disease patients that we had been doing for years with our COPD patients. And, you know, it's like what we knew about COPD helped us with the pulmonary fibrosis patients. What we learned about pulmonary fibrosis helped us with the pulmonary hypertension patients. What we learned about pulmonary hypertension helped us with the POTS and dysautonomia patients. And what we learned about the POTS and dysautonomia patients is helping us now with the COVID patients. So it's all a kind of a framework in which, you know, learn from my experience. Don't make the same mistakes that people have been making for 100 years. And, you know, watch the videos and share this stuff with your team, because you know what? Sometimes people don't know. And if you're going to take the effort of actually doing the rehab, make it a worthwhile program. Okay. All right. So this is our website. I want to this is pulmonarywellness.org. And I want to just show you around this site and show you some of the things that are available to you for free. But if you happen to have an extra $1 million and you want to send it to us, I will name something after you. Okay. Probably a walker. But the thing is that after this, I'll take questions, but this is our team. Okay. It sounds obvious what that is. Okay. If you want to find out about us, you can do that. Education. Okay. So here's my book, Ultimate Pulmonary Wellness. You can read it for free right here. Okay. So shortness of breath, the respiratory system, best breathing techniques, daily activity, ultimate pulmonary wellness, pulmonary medications, pulmonary exercise, treadmill 101, pulmonary nutrition, emotional health, prevention of infection, secretion clearance, and all of the other greatest hits. If you speak Spanish, it's now available in Spanish. Okay, right here. So that's my book. Here's the webinars. I was the first, the original, often imitated, never duplicated. Here, I was doing webinars before we even had cameras. When I was doing it from my office, it was like radio. No one could communicate with us, and we didn't actually know if anyone could hear us even. But I do an hour-and-a-half webinar every week, and all of these webinars are here, and I have really brilliant guests with me, okay, on a lot of these webinars. So these webinars, and there's dozens of them, but you can watch any of these for free right here, okay? Lecture Series 2020. Lecture Series 2020 quickly became the COVID Rehab and Recovery Series. Here are my live talks, and there are multiples on pulmonary fibrosis, okay? So here's all things oxygen, and this is 2 hours all about how to use oxygen. Living with PF. Here is the one from Baylor University, but you can see, and I'll put the direct link to this one here, but there's a lot of information here. You know, an hour and a half is not that much time. For most people, they probably dread it. You know, it's like Jerry Seinfeld says, it says public speaking is what most people hate most, the number one fear. And he says most people would rather be in the casket at a funeral than giving the eulogy. Okay. But I am an incessant talker, as you can tell. Podcasts, news and views. We also have a Facebook group, and the Blueprint is a continuing education program that I do for professionals. Here's boot camp. Let me log in and I'll show you what boot camp is. Okay, so boot camp. Here's the information, how boot camp works, blah, 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 blah. But I'll give you an example. Here's day one, okay? Each day there are 4 components of boot camp. One is called our daily breath. One is called thoughts and motivations. One is called BBFS, breathing, balance, flexibility, and strength training. And one is called the walkabouts, pulmonary cardio walkabouts. And what these are basically videos that we've shot all over the world. And instead of doing nothing, you can walk in place and watch these beautiful scenery, beautiful animals, and, you know, music, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But each day there are 4 things for you to do. Okay. This is an introduction to the day. Thoughts and motivations are like kind of, let me show you. I'll show you like, I'll show you just a little sample of what let me log out. And if you click on, I'll show you just a little sample of what this looks like. So I'll show you thoughts and motivations for a second. You can see my screen, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is only 2 minutes.
Every day, we're going to have deep thoughts, motivations, and meditation. It might be a thought that I want you to think about. It might be an idea, a saying, a quote, a poem that I want you to take into your day and figure out how that relates to you. I'm going to motivate you. I'm going to do my best to get you moving.
Life itself is always great, and life is precious, and life is something that you need to hold on to and you need to fight for. The best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is today. The mind is a very, very powerful being, okay? As I said before, it can be our best friend. When it's helping us, it can be our worst enemy. It is okay to not be strong all the time. It is okay to not be happy all the time. It is okay to be weak at times. We all have those moments. It's not honoring our weakness. It's honoring our humanity. The ones that are going to be the first one to be there when a friend in need is a friend indeed are often going to be the last person to ask for help. Remember that you can. And ask yourself, how much of this is real and how much of this is what I've been conditioned to believe over time. It doesn't matter where you are right this moment. This is our starting point. I said, well, what did I learn? And she said, well, maybe you learned that you're not as strong as you thought you were. And I said, well, how is that a good thing? And she said, it's not a good thing or a bad thing, but it's a real thing. You have that cry or you do it right out in the open, I don't care. And then you get back on that horse and we're gonna kick some ass together, okay? Have a great week, my friends. Have a great week.
So in addition to a lot of information about pulmonary disease, you'll get to see all my hairstyles, my different outfits, my sunglasses. And I'm just going to show you one more so you get an idea of what the exercise looks like, and then I will take questions. So
we wanted to create a program that would support the respiratory system in the best way that we can.
So today I want to sort of go back to the basics.
When you feel like no matter what you do, you cannot catch your breath and panic has set in, these are the times when it's most important to talk to yourself.
this is Tai Chi and Qigong for pulmonary health.
Remind yourself that you know what to do, and remind yourself that you have certain tricks that you can utilize, certain tools in your kit that will help you regain control of your breathing.
And as you lean forward, float out.
Our goal is to break into that cycle by, number one, teaching you more effective breathing techniques.
Yoga.
And I want you to breathe in. You want to do this about 4 times.
And number two, teaching you how to exercise so that your body becomes more efficient, stronger, and better at using oxygen. So we're going to try 10.
Inhale. Exhale, send the elbows back.
And then we're going to do both arms together, breathing in. Again, as you get stronger, you can increase the time. And consequently, you become less short of breath. So in for 2, out for 2.
My one piece of advice to anybody with, whether it be chronic lung disease, kidney disease, heart disease, whatever, as long as you're receiving your optimal treatment, the one thing you've got to do is keep moving.
7, again, 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Gentle, good, you're tapping, but that's what you need.
This week, we have something a little bit new for you, something fresh. We got some new moves, we got some new steps, and after that, we're going to give you a little bit of a soul train walk, okay? We don't live to rehab.
We rehab so that you can live your life.
Questions? Just unmute, go for it.
We don't have to
Okay.
change our hairdos though, right?
You'll enjoy it though.
Okay.
And you'll be wearing
Okay.
a mask, so no one will know it's you. So,
Yeah, this is Betsy in Denver.
Betsy.
And I moved here to Denver 2-3 years ago, and I have family in Idaho and California. And now they are planning to come and visit me in the summer and stay in my house. How should I handle those visits? Should they stay with me? How many people should I allow in the house? I mean, what would be the things to consider?
I think you should give them a list of local hotels. And yeah, I think that's, I would say a hard no on that. Okay. Why? For many reasons. Okay. Number one, they're traveling. Okay. Number two, you must protect your home as your castle. Okay. I trust myself and maybe one or two other people in the world. Okay. Everybody's going to tell you they're vaccinated, right? Some of them aren't. Everybody's going to tell you they're washing their hands. Not everybody does, right? They did a little thing a few years ago where they were at a medical convention and somebody stood in the bathroom and watched how many of the doctors washed their hands. You don't want to know the numbers. It wasn't a lot of them, okay? So the fact that somebody's going to get on a plane or get in a car, travel, cross the country, no, they shouldn't be staying with you under any circumstances because you don't want COVID, okay? If you get COVID, it's not going to be good. And nobody is worth that. And, you know, people say, oh, we want to see you. We love you. No, if you love me, you will stay away. And I would suggest they stay somewhere else. I would suggest if you're going to eat together, make it outdoors, make it socially distanced. You're going to continue to wear your mask. Now, that being said, we don't know what's going to happen. Okay. Maybe things will be magically better by that time. I don't think so. But I think you have to protect your health and well-being at all costs. I would also suggest having everyone who's planning to come see you get vaccinated, you know, definitely double vaxxed. I would say single vax with J&J, but today something came out that there's been some clotting, so they're halting J&J for a few moments until they can figure that out. But that happened with another one too, and then they worked out the kinks. But there's nothing that would allow somebody to stay in my home personally. And I advise you the same thing. And everybody's going to say, oh, but. To me, it's a hard no, 100%. My opinion, okay, people make decisions. Listen, I just don't do it, okay? And I don't associate with people who, you know, I've been really strong and protective during COVID because I would even tell you this before COVID, right? I would still say, hey, you know, you're putting yourself at risk by doing this, by having people stay in your home, right? Especially if there's kids involved, especially if there's sick people. But with COVID, no brainer. No one's coming in my house. And also in the book, there's a full chapter on prevention of infection. I was a germaphobe before COVID, okay? But my philosophy, and I have also, you know, I have 30 years of cardiopulmonary experience, but I also have more than 20 years of EMS experience. And I was working EMS in Queens, New York during SARS. So, you know, I've been exposed to a ton of things. I've thankfully, now look, you get the wrong person on the wrong day, you could get sick, okay? But I know I don't want it. And I would even tell you beforehand, before COVID, that they shouldn't be coming to stay with you. And I would say now, you know, and I know that's terrible. Nobody wants to hear that, right? But we need you alive and well, right? What if you have one last great trip, but you get COVID and you wind up on a ventilator, right? And I'm not trying to, I'm not going to say I'm not trying to scare you because I hope you should be a little scared. You know, you should be scared of COVID. It's not a joke. For anyone who's like, oh, I'm not scared of COVID, they have no experience with COVID. Because if you have any experience with it, you would be taking every precaution possible. I'm sorry, I know that's not the answer you wanted, but it's my best answer for you.
Good to know.
I got something. Your oxygen provider should be able to provide those
Non-rebreather masks.
non-rebreathers for you. You just need to check with them,
And you need
and they should be able to provide those for you.
Oh, I'll check. I'll check. Thanks.
they should. You know what? Here's the thing, and I'll get you in on a little another industry secret, right? Like the durable medical equipment industry has been decimated over time, and it's, you know, there a lot of the companies, they're trying to just stay afloat. If they can't, I mean, to me, I just saw on that list, one of them had like 10 masks for $20. Okay, I'd rather spend the $20, have those masks in my house, and then not have to call somebody if I need it. My opinion. That's, you know, I mean, look, if you don't, you can get it from them and you could have extras, but what if they give you one and it doesn't work right? So then you have at least a few others. You know, always prepare for the worst. You know, don't prepare for everything going right. Be prepared for everything going wrong. And one other thing I was going to say about COVID and all these different infections, pneumonia, the flu, you know, if you take there's a concept called universal precautions. And universal precautions is, I assume everybody's got everything. Okay. And if I think I'm going to come in contact with it, if I think they're going to cough in my face, spit in my face, throw up in my face, anything like that, or I have to touch something, I assume I don't want whatever they have. And even if they don't have anything, I don't want that in my face. I think one of the wrong messages that people sent, or one of the errors in messaging about COVID, was my mask protects you and your mask protects me. Because I think a lot of people say, well, you know what? I don't actually give a crap about that person. And I'm a cynical New Yorker, so just please don't take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, okay? But I think some people said, well, you know what? That person's wearing a mask, so I don't have to wear one. I'm protected, okay? But your mask also heavily protects you, and it's your best defense against airborne, you know, airborne diseases. Other questions?
Yes, I have one. I'm in Colorado Springs, not Denver. Okay. So I'm kind of an exception. We're at 6,000 feet here. I'm on a lot of timed medication, Josh, and I'm just wondering how you feel about, after I eat, I can close my eyes and go sound asleep. How do you feel about sleeping after you've eaten, regardless of whether it's a snack or whether it's a meal? But with timed medication, I can't go without eating unless I get sick stomach.
All right. Well, how do I feel about sleeping after I eat? I love doing that. I love it.
Won't hurt me?
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just joking. But I'll tell you. So I can't say, I don't know you. I don't know if it's going to hurt you or not. But here's the considerations. Okay. The considerations are, A, we now have food in your stomach, right? So it could potentially affect your breathing, because we talked about the fact that, you know, when you have food in your stomach and that abdominal content sits above the diaphragm has to work harder, right, in order to contract down against it. So it could make you breathe more difficultly, or it could make you breathe more shallowly. If you're talking about sleeping, you know, lying down, it's even worse, because when you lie down, then the abdominal contents come back up, more blood comes back up, there's more venous return, which will actually make the heart work even harder. So there's considerations there. The other thing is that if you are somebody who's known to have reflux, you know, there's a doctor that I love at Cornell named Robert Kaner. In my opinion, he's one of the, if I had interstitial lung disease, he's who I'd go to, okay? But I once asked myself, what's the single best piece of advice that you would get? He said, number one, make sure you get the right diagnosis at all costs. Number two, if you have reflux, treat it, because the trachea and the esophagus are very close together. And so the problem is, you eat, your body's producing acid. Now you lay down. What if that acid comes up your esophagus and into your airways, right? Now you have more inflammation in your airways. So there are definite factors there. Like, there's no particular harm, nothing about eating and then going to sleep that's like, it's not like, you know, mixing cocaine and heroin. But like, you know, but it's like, if you can sit up, it's probably better for you. Maybe after you eat, you could turn your oxygen up a little bit just to give you a little more rest. But the idea of just having a meal and then lying right down to sleep, it's got a few little things. The other thing is, I would also consider If you're not sure about your sleep, if you're not sure if you desaturate, if you're not sure how your breathing is, at a minimum, an overnight oxygen study, which could be done in your home. They send you the oximeter, you wear it overnight. And if that shows anything, suspect, then a formal sleep study to find out if you have the potential for sleep apnea. I mean, that doesn't answer, I know that's a long, but those are the factors. There's no definite, like most things, the answer is maybe. It's that simple, okay? But if you have timed medication and you're worried that you're gonna have like a chicken pot pie and then you're gonna be out for the night, then set an alarm for your medication. Or like, can you give me an example of what medication is timed?
Okay, I'm doing Aspirin,
Esbriet? Okay.
Eliquis.
Okay. And what's the timing apart? Like how far apart are they?
Okay, I do the Aspirin at 8 o'clock, 1 o'clock, and 6. And it's a 6 o'clock one that I really fight keeping my eyes from going crossed after I eat.
Why don't you just take it before you eat? Or do you have to have food in your stomach when you take it?
Because it makes me nauseous.
So ask your doctor this. Ask your doctor if you can maybe take like a Pepcid or a Zantac. And I'm not saying definitely do this because I don't know if there's contraindication. I'm just saying there are, it's like the old lady who swallowed the spider to catch the fly. There's ways to do it. So it's like if you take your medication and it gives you stuff, maybe you could take something to settle the stomach. I don't know if that could also potentially interfere with the effectiveness of the medication with the Esbriet, but I would ask your doctor about these things. Or worst case scenario, what time do you get up in the morning?
Well, that kind of depends because it just 6 to 8, but I'm a good sleeper. I don't have any trouble sleeping.
Get up at 6 a.m., switch it to 7, 12, and 5, and eat at 6.
Okay, that was what I was asking you. Yeah.
Your body doesn't care what time of day it is as long as the space is right. The only thing that there are some medications that time of day is important. Like, for example, if you were taking a nebulizer or a breathing medication or something like that, you want to take it during the day in the morning so you could get the benefit of it throughout the day, not at night before you go to sleep. But just change your schedule around. Your body's not going to care if it's 7, 12, and 5 versus 8, 1, and 6.
Okay. Yeah, that I could do.
Yeah.
And as far as that medicine goes, though, aspirin and Ofev, you got to eat a meal with it because there's nausea and there's a couple other things that happen with those meds. So they want you at least to have 300 calories when you take those meds.
So what I would say about that is, let's say you take it at 7. So you get up at 6, you have breakfast, right? At 7, you take your medication. You have a little food at 11. You take your medication at 12, and then you have some kind of, like maybe a dirty martini at 4:30. And you no, I'm kidding. You take like a little snack, something, so that you're not gonna get sick to your stomach with just the Esbriet. But there's ways around that. And again, I don't want to like give you, I don't teach kids how to curse, but if it were like, let's say 5.5 hours apart instead of, or 4.5 hours apart is a little too little, but there's ways around it. Just, map out your day and see what's happening when.
Good. Yep. Thank you.
As an alternative, when you go to 6, when you fall asleep at 6, do you go to sleep for the night?
No, that's my problem. I sit in my chair and I'll sleep for 2 hours.
Okay, then do 10, 3, and 8, or 11, 11, 4, and 9. I mean, just map out your day. Just make sure that the spacing is right, and figure out the best way for you to do that.
Okay, so should the spacing be the same time?
You got to ask your doctor, but yeah, it should be the same. So let me say this. So like if you have a medication that you're supposed to take 12 hours apart, right? It's not just that it's 12 hours apart. It's that if you take it only 10 hours apart, that means it's 14 hours till the next dose, right? The ideal for medication is steadiness, right? Okay. even is. You don't want to take a flight like up, down, up, down, up, down. You want a nice smooth flight, and you want your body to get a nice steady supply of the medication as it needs it. 6 minutes left. Any other questions?
Could you talk please about insomnia? That's the problem I have to deal with.
Trouble sleeping. I'm kidding. So I mean, there's so many reasons why people can have insomnia. Now I do have also on the webinars, okay? There's one webinar called Get Some Z's, okay? And it's Dr. Anna Krieger, who is, in my opinion, the best sleep doctor in New York City. Watch it. I'm not an expert on sleep, but you know, the thing about restful sleep is there's different stages of sleep, right? So sleep is like this. It's like we have stage 1 sleep, stage 2 sleep, stage, you know, 3, which is like slow wave sleep. And then after that is rapid eye movement, REM sleep. REM sleep is the restful sleep. That's the restorative sleep, right? So if you go like level 1, level 2, and then you go back to level 1, level 2, level 3, back to level 2, and you wake up a little bit, level 1, 2, 3, back to level 1, you never get that restorative sleep. So there's a lot to be done about sleep. I'm not an expert on sleep. I would suggest starting with Dr. Krieger's lecture, and then there are sleep specialists. You know, there's a lot of reasons why you might not be able to sleep.
Hey, Noah, it's Katie. Hey, I'm so sorry to interrupt. One thing who I do recommend on sleep, you guys, is a guy by the name of Matthew Walker. He's a neurobiologist, something like that, from UC Berkeley in California. And he's written a book about the why we sleep. He's done some of these TED Talks, and he's also got some other YouTube videos you can watch. Again, Matthew Walker. And I listened to a podcast he did, and I listened to it 3 times. It was really profound about the restorative nature of sleep and why it's so important to us. So absolutely, just to add that to the...
Not that you listen to the podcast and it makes you fall asleep, right? Okay, all right. There are these amazing apps out now, like Calm, like, you know, there's a lot of apps that really help get you ready for sleep, you know. And in the talk with Dr. Krieger, you know, we talk about sleep hygiene. We talk about like, don't do something exciting right before sleep, don't drink coffee, but also how your room is set up. You know what I mean? Do you have your phone with you? Are you like going to bed wired? There's a whole science of sleep, and we're not going to cover it in 3 minutes, but watch the webinar. Martha.
Yeah, I was having problems with sleep for a while, and I have the app Insight Timer, and there's a lot of sleep meditations in there. So I did it on my phone, and I would just turn it on, and with the lights out and all settled down, and a lot of times I'd be asleep halfway through the app. So
yeah,
meditation does help.
Too. I can also send you the recording of this, and maybe when you start to listen to it, it'll help you fall asleep. But there's another guy that I love named Richard Brown, and he writes a book called The Healing Power of the Breath. And he talks about meditation and really enhancing parasympathetic tone and things like that. Yeah, I mean, sleep is elusive for a lot of people, but there are a lot of things that you can do, and there's a lot of people working on it. 2-minute warning. I'll take one more question. All right. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Noah, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
I was on mute, but I was just going to say, you say on this boot camp, it would start on a Monday, that whenever you do this?
You can start whenever you want. It's personalized. So you can start whenever you want. Whatever you start, that's your day 1, and then it gives you stuff every day.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Noah and Dr. Greenspan. And if you send me that stuff, I'll get it out to everybody.
Absolutely.
And I'm glad that so many of you got to join. Looks like we had 40 at one time on here. 41 now.
All right, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Dr. Greenspan.
Thank you.
Take care.